who's joining us and to everyone who's watching the replay. My name is Andrea Thompson and hope you enjoy my avatar once again. And I am the founder and director of the Film Girl Film Festival. And I am here with the part one of our interview with the full-length feature filmmakers from the Film Girl Festival. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, for our first step, I want to just go around and let you all introduce yourselves and say which film you directed, please. Chi, if you wanted to go first.
Hi, my name is Chi Mai. I'm from Vietnam. With Pedro, we directed The Girl from Đắk Lắk.
And Pedro?
Yeah, so Pedro from Spain, but yeah, with Chi, we directed as well the Girl from Đắk Lắk in Vietnam.
Excellent. And we have someone else joining us live. Thank you, Susan, for joining us. I'm just asking everyone to go around and to introduce themselves and which film they're from. So are you ready to go right now, or?
Sure.
All right.
So hi, everyone. Susan Bloom. I did Goodbye to All Cats, and I live in Southern California.
Excellent. And Constantino?
Io sono Costantino Maiani da Firenze, Toscana, Italia, e sono presente con il film Il domani di Laura, Laura's Hereafter, dedicato al tema della violenza contro le donne.
So my name is Costantino and I'm speaking from Florence in Tuscany, Italy, and I am the director of the movie Laura is Hereafter, which is about the theme of violence against women.
Thank you. And last but by no means least, Laura.
Hi, Laura Black. I'm in also Southern California, and I directed the COVID Chronicles.
Excellent. And if I've noticed a common theme, which we can all relate to, even more so now, is isolation, either if that's from each other because of your goals, from violence that happened to you, or because a certain lack of a voice and privilege. So I'd like to ask each of you the inspiration, like why you decided to make the film about your topics. So Chi and Pedro, I'd like to start with you because you tell a very different kind of story of basically the classic girl coming to the big city to make good in The Girl from Đắk Lắk. So what inspired you both to tell this story?
Hi. Yeah, I think, well, Chi and I, we worked in this film from the beginning. Like, I think we kind of like created the film together, even though like I kind of like had the idea of making a film of people who come to a big city, and maybe the expectation versus the reality is quite different. And then from there I met Chi, and we developed a whole new story, and yeah, I don't know, Chi, what do you think?
So Pedro told me first about what he saw in a coffee house in Ho Chi Minh City, which is like the commercial hub of Vietnam, where a lot of migrant workers come from the countryside to seek like a better future. And I think the scene that he described to me were these three girls, apparently from the countryside, working at a coffee house, and they all sat around that empty coffee house. Everybody was on their phone. So there was this kind of sense of disconnection, of isolation, and it's a very simple scene, but to him it spoke volumes. And as friends, he shared with me, and I connected with it right away. And then together we developed this screenplay and then the whole film together. Because for me, migrant workers, and I don't want to use this word, so for the sake of lacking a better word, sort of underrepresented stories. So that's how we started working together on this project.
Thank you. And speaking of underrepresented stories, that brings me to Laura. Your film is more obviously about isolation because it's basically a COVID film. So what in particular inspired you to tell this story? Because I also don't see, to put it bluntly, women of a certain age represented this way on screen, which is something else that attracted me to your movie.
Thanks. Yeah, that was intentional. It's a longtime lesbian couple who are separated by the pandemic and not able to see each other over the course of, in this film, 8 months. And how do they connect, and how do we connect when we're physically isolated from each other? So we set it up through a series of either FaceTime calls or any kind of, like, on your phone, things like that. And we did it in a series of vignettes to tell the course of their story and how they dealt with it, hopefully comedically in many ways. And how do you laugh at yourself? How do you laugh at the situation? But then I also wanted to emphasize sort of the longing that they wanted to connect. And I also wanted it to be something of, like, as you said, Andrea, as a, an underrepresented community, older lesbians. I mean, who the heck sees that anywhere? So that was kind of the impetus for that.
Did anyone any couple or any people in particular inspire you to tell this story?
Well, not in particular. I think I just been looking at the landscape of both film and TV lately, and it just isn't there. I mean, you might have like a friend or the neighbor or whatever, but when you see things like front and center, like a recent example is Hacks, the woman is successful stand-up, but yet she's of a certain age and they're trying to cancel her, basically, not the cancel culture thing, but cancel her because she's older. And in this case, I thought, well, people are still vital. So I call them the gay Golden Girls because, they're gay and they're of a certain age. So that was sort of my inspiration between that and, seeing what was lacking on the landscape as a whole.
And Constantino, wow, this woman is isolated in your film because of trauma. So, and I was kind of surprised to see a male director, frankly, telling this story so well and so sensitively. So what inspired you to direct this very intense story?
Così intenso.
Sì, io credo che il compito del cinema sia affrontare problemi importanti per la nostra società. In Italia questo problema è molto importante e ho voluto affrontarlo perché mi interessava appunto creare un importante personaggio femminile. Ecco, questo era, la cosa. E poi la sfida principale è stata cercare di creare, di affrontare questo argomento da un punto di vista originale, inedito, almeno per quanto riguarda il cinema italiano.
Okay. So I decided to face this theme from original point of view, because in Italy this team is quite underestimated, and so we tried to have a different and original point of view on a team that is very important in our society but has been treated in different ways, and so we tried to have an original point of view for this team.
Perché in Italia, ecco, da un punto di vista dei lungometraggi, sono molto rari i film che affrontano, cioè che mettono la donna che ha subito la violenza al centro del film. Ecco.
So in Italy it is not very common to have the woman in the center of the scene, in the center of the stage, when it comes about violence against women. So we try to have the female point of view on a team that is usually told from the male point of view.
Okay.
Thank you.
Grazie. pretty much the only word I know in Italian. So, and Susan, you're telling a very simple and very complicated story, because your documentary is about kind of weighing this love that many people in New Zealand have for their cats, and also, and many people have for their cats, and also this desire to preserve native species, which the cats are hunting down. So, I guess, so what made you decide to make a film about this?
Well, so I think it's also in many ways a story about isolation because of the way evolution worked in New Zealand, right? You have this very isolated landmass, and everything that all the species that evolved there did so in that environment, right? And then it's disrupted by humans coming in and bringing these beloved companions or
And
food
also
sources.
these two sides being very isolated from each other, and who can blame them? It's both from a very emotional, very understandable place.
Yeah, so we love our cats. And, the devastation that cats cause globally is really significant, and not really, there's no light really shining on that. And I say that as a lifelong cat owner and lover. And to see, like, as soon as we got our cat where we live here, the lizard population just was decimated. And so on. So, I've been working for many years on doing media projects out on the California Channel Islands off the coast of California, which also had very unique endemic species that had been devastated by people turning the islands into ranches and bringing out, sheep and pigs. And one of the islands was a place to go hunting, so they brought like elk and deer, and just like craziness. And these ecosystems are just utterly destroyed. And New Zealand, because of those species that evolved there, they're nowhere else in the world. So there's also, this interest in restoring these ecosystems to, retain biodiversity and cultural identity and so on, against the cat ownership problem, and the idea that, within the sort of psyche there, that you cannot confine a cat. It's against its nature. So cats need to be free to roam, to live a full life. So, it was just a really interesting story to me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And Chi, and this is mostly directed, my next question is mostly directed towards Chi, and but also I want to include Pedro. The central character, Chi, was this inspired by anyone in particular you knew, or Pedro, did you actually meet and speak with anyone who inspired this character?
Sung, the central character of our project, she is the consummation of many migrant workers, especially young women that I have seen in the city. And also I once was as young as she is, and then I was also a migrant to the big cities. I come from like a small town, and at the age of 18, 19, I moved to Hanoi for university, and it's much bigger than my hometown. And I also had to go through this period of looking for jobs at coffee houses to support myself. And so I went through a stage of this feeling, the solitude in the big city. Yeah. So there's no particular one person, but it's observation throughout many years, and also from my life experience.
And Pedro, did you have anything to add before I kind of followed that up with another question?
Yeah, well, maybe as well that that when we when we were making the film, when we before the film, we made a trailer to try to get some funds from certain, how do you call them, the crowdfunding campaigns, right? And we were doing the casting for the main actress as well, but we didn't really have like a script or anything yet. We only had the idea. And well, when we saw Soon, who is the main character of the film, well, we wanted to work with her. And I mean, she's also a migrant worker as well. So a lot of the character as well came from our conversations with her. I mean, it's not necessarily her. It's actually not her at all. But like a lot of those conversations helped as well in the development of the character. So yeah, as she said, it's like a combination of many people and yeah.
Alrighty, thank you. And I think I'll follow up on that for my next round of questions. Oh, of course, a cat showed up on our group interview. And Laura, you mentioned the word canceled, and whenever someone mentions this, I always want to follow up with another question. So I don't think I quite made out, like, when I asked what inspired this, who that was canceled inspired to make.
I was using Hacks as an example of an older gal that is successful, but yet the casino in which she performs wants to cut her hours and bring in quote unquote newer talent. So that's what I didn't mean the whole cancel culture thing. I just meant like her
Oh yes,
are canceled. So I know you got to be careful with that word these days. So yeah, that's
yes. That's why I wanted to follow up and explore that. But yeah, that's I see. And well, then I'll move on to my next question then, because obviously the main story is between these two women speaking remotely. So how did you? But other members of the cast are also included. So how did you decide like who else to kind of include and insert in this dynamic? Because there's a yoga instructor, there's a relative, and there's kind of a someone from someone in the past that comes back into their lives without going into anything. So how did you make those choices?
Well, I wanted to make the choices of the people that were the closest, quote unquote, to them. The relative is a sister. Another character is the best friend of. She's sorry. This is Tallulah. Anyway, so the best friend, because they've been isolated and not being able to talk to them, and just sort of like use those folks. And then how do you stay, I guess, active? So you have to do like a remote trainer or a remote yoga teacher or a remote psychologist. And some are more successful than others as far as that goes. But it's like, I don't know if you all went through this, but same with me, trying to do online classes, trying to do Zoom friggin' parties with people. It got, kind of endless and tedious at times, because let's face it, we do need the human connection. And them having been together all these years and then having to resort to that, how do they make it work? So they did like a cooking class together. I mean, things that you can do, but are obviously better in person, but they tried.
Yes, we all did. Thank you. And nice to meet Tallulah. And Constantino, one of your choices in your film was quite fascinating, in that your central character obviously was dealing with the aftermath of violence, and she finds empathy in another woman that she did not expect to. And it would have been the more common route would have had her experience this violence as well, but that wasn't the case. So I found that a very fascinating choice. Can you tell me why you took that route rather than the usual one?
Sì, ti ringrazio per la domanda, perché è, diciamo, un tema centrale questo. È molto importante perché la protagonista, che è la donna che ha subito violenza, è in un momento di fragilità, di difficoltà, e quindi è percepita come, diciamo, la persona debole. Ecco, è una persona normale, una madre di famiglia, appunto normale. Magari...
Sì. So the main character is the woman who had this trauma of violence, but she's a very normal woman. She's a mother. She has a family, but she's in a position of vulnerability. She's very fragile after the violence. So when we meet her in the movie, she's in a very difficult moment.
Ecco, e quando il film inizia arriva un'altra donna, e quest'altra donna è più giovane, viene da una regione d'Italia, il nord, che è industrializzato, e quindi lei è sicura di sé, ha come dire, la sua vita professionale è già tracciata, è una donna che è percepita come vincente dalla società, ecco.
And the second woman, she's from a region of Italy, from North Italy. North Italy is a richer area of Italy, so she's very self-confident. She's a winner. She's very strong. So these two women are very different at the beginning of the movie, because one is the strong one, and Laura, the main character, is the fragile part. Is the fragile woman. So this is why the relationship between the two women is so important, because they're representing at the beginning of the movie two different models of women.
Ecco, e diciamo che nella nostra società italiana, ma anche penso a livello così più ampio, Stefania, l'amica, è percepita come la persona vincente, e invece nel mio film cosa succede? Laura ha dentro di sé come un potere, e quindi poi riesce a entrare in sintonia con l'amica e a farla cambiare, a farle, come dire, a farle anche riconquistare una femminilità. E significa che in realtà Laura, che è la persona che apparentemente è più fragile, in realtà porta con sé una grande forza.
So our intention was to show that Laura, who is the woman who has been abused, at the end of the movie is the stronger one, in the sense that telling her story to her friend Stefania, she's able to make a change in Stefania, and to make her understand that Laura is the strongest one at the end of the story, because she's the one who has the power inside herself, telling her story to make a change in the other woman, the other friend. So this was our intention.
E infatti il personaggio di Stefania all'inizio c'è questa cosa simbolica, ha i capelli raccolti sempre, e poi mentre il film procede i capelli si sciolgono, e quindi questo gesto di sciogliersi i capelli,
io non lo so dire sta cosa,
diciamo, è una riconquista di femminilità, ecco.
So we were trying to use Stefania hair as a symbol, because at the beginning of the movie, she always the hair are I don't know how to say it in English, but the hair are a symbol of the power of a woman to be a woman in every sense. Also at the end of the movie, we try to use this symbol of the long hair as a symbol of the feminine world.
Thank you. Grazie. And
Questa non la sapevo dire.
and Susan, you mentioned earlier in your answer that you had a cat yourself, correct?
My whole life.
Yes. So, and yet you're obviously share the concerns of many about the New Zealand environment as well. So, I'm kind of curious is how you show both sides very compassionately in your film. So I'm kind of curious as to how you yourself kind of reconcile your love for your cat versus your obvious love for the native wildlife of New Zealand that are in danger.
So I think, I mean, for me, the film that I wanted to make was really about, you know, one, the mental gymnastics we perform to get to what we want to feel is true, you know, what our beliefs are. And I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge not just in New Zealand, but, you know, in the United States, cats, domestic cats, kill millions of birds every year, and globally billions of birds and, you know, other wildlife, you know, lizards, whatever, insects. You know, so it's not just birds, but, you know, in New Zealand, because the birds were, you know, evolved as ground nesters, it was just such a big, obvious impact. And I do think it's important to acknowledge, I mean, we look at Tallulah and
I've been looking at her, like, pawing
right?
at Laura's chin kind of the whole time and trying not to giggle.
Yeah,
I mean, so
that's
the chant.
I mean, we love our cats, and our cats love us, and it's important to acknowledge, you know, that companionship that cats bring us is also really important. But, you know, at some point we also have to acknowledge the destruction they do to the environment. So it's important to, like, I think to be clear-eyed about these things. And if, you know, depending where you live, the destruction is much more devastating towards endemic species than in other places. And, you know, here in Southern California at night, you know, we have to worry about predators going after our cats. New Zealand, that cats are apex predators. No one's going after them. But, you know, we have to worry about coyotes and mountain lions and, you know, raccoons. I mean, so we, you know, our cats are in a very different situation as well.
Yeah, New Zealand does seem like a very unique situation like that. Yes, thank you. And Chi and Pedro, I'm kind of curious as to your dynamic on set, because Chi, you obviously have more experience with the topic. You know, you're from Vietnam. You were kind of, sort of, in this, in this situation somewhat, that you have a lot in common with the main situation of your character, even though you were moving for college and such, and kind of more had a place to live, I assume, whereas she didn't. You know, when she moved there, the character didn't. So I'm curious as to how you two collaborated on set. Can you kind of give me an idea of how that worked?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. And when we first proposed this kind of collaboration, a lot of people questions if we could pull it through. So we sort of like divided and conquer, but cross-checked with each other. So Pedro would work with we will talk mainly with the DOP or the technicians, and why I would focus on the actors. We use known actors, so there was a lot of conversation going on set, because there was a lot of improvisation as well. And so we also use real location, and we're trying to retain the authenticity of that location. So it was also like a very small crew, a skeleton crew. So a lot of conversations were happening on set, and we kind of divided that way. But at the same time, we looked over each other's shoulder, and then we discussed when we sort of, that's what the word that I use, called cross-check. And that's how we keep the conversation between us going. So even when I worked with the actors, because of the whole, you know, cultural understanding or linguistic acumen there because I'm the native. Pero could spot out, you know, sometimes, even if sometimes the conversations were going on, the dialogues were going on, and he could be like, I feel like the body language of that actors were a bit excessive. So that way we contributed the way that we observe and the way that we felt about the performances and everything during the process, like two different pairs of eyes. What do you think, Pedro?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's how we worked, but that happened on set. But there's a lot of work before that happened. We were developing the story for like around 2 years. So during those 2 years, there were loads of conversations as well. And well, the fact as well that like when we first met, T and I, like we really clicked in terms of like what kind of films we like. That also helped. I mean, that we were always on the same page. So once we got on set, we both knew what we wanted, even though there's like a lot of improvisation especially in dialogues as well. But yeah, as Chi was saying, like I mean, even my Vietnamese is not great. I mean, I've been living there for some years, but it's difficult to learn. But I was kind of understanding what they were saying, and then when we were cutting, like Chi and I were talking, what they were saying, and maybe there was something there that I wasn't really convinced. So yeah, I was more or less like keeping the pace as well. And actually, I edited the film being spoken in Vietnamese, so I kind of like knew like what they were saying in all scenes as well. And the fact as well, as I was saying, that the T and I, we share the same kind of like taste in cinema. That I mean, she almost was like speaking with the DOP. It was not me, and I was also speaking with the girls, with the actresses. So like as you were saying, it's just like cross-check. But there were some specific tasks, even though we were all doing everything, because we were not many people on set.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a collaborative based process. So that's always nice to hear about. Very much. And Laura, my question for you also involves like the directorial process. You've obviously directed not obvious, but you've directed a number of short films, and films in addition to this one. So with such a different film that was most obviously about isolation and COVID, was the directorial process and the filmmaking process for you that different from your other films?
Yeah, it was quite a bit different because not everybody was in the room at the same time. So I would have to sometimes direct the vignettes virtually, and then you utilize the editing process for when they would do the responses to each other, things like that. So it was challenging in that regard, you know, because you don't necessarily have everybody at the same time or everybody in the same room. So it's like directing remotely. So that was probably the biggest challenge. Although the folks that I worked with were fantastic. I mean, you know, you just give a slight adjustment and they knew exactly what to do and everything like that. And I think it helped because they were short vignettes, you know. So I think if I tried to have done this with very, very long scenes, it would have been a little bit, maybe the rhythm would have been a little more clunky than it was in this case. So, but yeah, so for that, you know, and then having really talk about skeleton crew, I think it was like an invisible crew in my case, because a lot of times it was just me, you know. So and you know, sometimes somebody would help with their filming as well. You know, I couldn't always be there in person with them, so that was kind of challenging. But in the end, it ended up being very rewarding because, you know, it definitely kept us going, kept us busy, kept the creativeness going that unfortunately, you weren't able to do as much during COVID because of everything being shut down. So,
Can definitely relate to that.
Mhm.
And Susan, one thing I'm curious about is in your documentary, you show a remarkable number of sides to the issue that you're discussing, and I was curious. There doesn't really seem to be a solution, and do you think there is one to like how much cats are embedded in not just in New Zealand society but in many societies, and then the environmental havoc they're kind of causing in a way? Do you think there's a solution to this?
So I think, one of my goals was to express how complicated the whole, situation is. And in New Zealand, to me, it's much simpler because of its unique situation with those species. So, I wanted to give the cat advocates as much time and space so that we really understand why they continue to have cats, without making it seem like gosh, what horrible people. But I do hope at the end that my goal is definitely that for cat owners to be like, okay, this is my last cat. Or okay, it's time to build a catio, where the cat can be outside but in a confined space and not go after the native wildlife there. So
I think she
Andrea left. So her devices stopped working. Yeah, so I have some questions for some of you all while we're waiting for her to come back. How did you find financing for your projects?
Maybe it's Constantino's turn, right? Like we were doing the...
Yeah.
Dunque, allora, in Italia per produrre un film si fa solo con i fondi del Ministero della Cultura, altrimenti è quasi impossibile. Il nostro film è stato un progetto molto particolare in questo senso, perché è stata fatta una raccolta fondi e poi c'è stato un progetto con una banca di Firenze.
So in Italy, the only possibility to produce a film is to have the help of the Ministry of Culture. In our case, we did crowdfunding, and after that, we had some help from a bank of Florence.
Ecco, e quindi abbiamo fatto la raccolta fondi e poi dopo questa banca ha messo un altro po' di finanziamenti e il nostro film è a basso costo, quindi questo ha comportato poi dei problemi durante la realizzazione, in particolare i tempi che erano stretti, ecco, quindi diciamo è stata una lavorazione abbastanza difficile, però ecco, quindi nella raccolta fondi ci sono stati, diciamo, molte persone che hanno messo un contributo e hanno collaborato a trovare appunto i soldi per realizzarlo.
So basically what made the movie possible was the help of all the people giving something for the crowdfunding. And so this was the main the main part of our financing, and also yes, the help of the bank. But the problem was that we were forced to do everything in a very short time. So this was very problematic for us because we didn't have enough funds to have all the time we needed. So our main problem was that we had to do it in a very short time because our financial help was very limited. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I think Andrea had a question for Constantino in the chat.
Here.
No, questo.
C'è?
No,
No.
no,
Oh.
porca.
Dice perché lei ha detto che forse I had a question, the mood on set basically.
Aspetta, come hai...
What was it like?
No,
If
questo...
we get...
Togliamolo, chat.
Questo.
No, ecco.
Ah,
sì, scusate.
Yes, so we were reading l'atmosfera sul set.
Dunque, è stata un'atmosfera molto positiva proprio perché tutti erano consapevoli che stavamo affrontando un tema che, come dicevo prima, nel cinema italiano è poco frequentato. Ecco, e in particolare c'è stata un'ottima sintonia con l'attrice protagonista, che è principalmente un'attrice di teatro, Valentina Banci, ed è una delle, diciamo, delle più importanti attrici che ci sono nella zona di Firenze e dintorni.
So the atmosphere on the set was extremely positive because there was a big awareness from everyone about the importance of the theme, and in particular from the main actress, Valentina Banci. She comes from theater, and she's one of the most important actresses in Italy for theater. So there was a very good harmony with her and the same point of view, and a very good relationship with her, and it made everything really easier and easier for us. And so we can say that the what was very important for us was to create a good bond with the main actress.
Oh, and I'm back. I'm sorry. I've never been kicked off that just in time for that last question. Good God. I have no idea what happened. I'm sorry. And okay. And yes, Constantino, did you have anything else before I moved on? All right, because it seemed like the end of that question. Oh boy. But anyway, the next question I had for you all, and I said in the private chat, was, in your way, you're all making films that are traditionally very underseen, undertold. So I'd like to ask about, did any particular movie, film, what were your influences basically on each of your films? So Chi and Pedro, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think we watched a lot of movies during those times, and we talked a lot. We drank beers and talked about cinema and what cinema meant to us and so on. But two movies that sort of now stood out in my mind was Not One Less and Rosetta. And now that I have said two films, I start to think a lot of other films that we discussed, but let me spare you the detail. So maybe Pedro can go on.
No, yeah, I agree. Like for me, well, Rosetta, like the Dardenne brothers, is one of my favorite films. And obviously, when we started the film, when we started the project, that was, I mean, you have a reference and you want to, like, I mean, I guess that you have like that in the back of your mind all the time. And when we did that teaser for the what's it called, the funding, was that name again, like the Kickstarter, was that like the crowdfunding? So when we did the teaser for that one, maybe there's like a kind of like a Rosetta style in that teaser, but the final film doesn't look like that at all. It's like way more like calm, and I think that's because of the 3 years that took us to complete. Like we had like something in mind, and it has been changing, and yeah, also like watching more films of around the area, and also like the work that we have done with the DOP, that has influenced us, I think, a little bit. He's also a filmmaker himself, and we both, she and I, we both like him a lot, and his style is also in the film, because he's the guy behind the camera as well. So yeah, but in terms of films, like I think like what started everything was Rosetta. I agree, and then, well, Not One Less is one of the films that we both love as well. So yeah.
I see. Thank you. And Laura, I'd like to ask any particular films, like books, etc., influence your film?
I think in the case of this one, it was more about the technique to be able to use for it, being that in many ways I wasn't able to see some of the folks in person. So one of the Steven Soderbergh films, and I can't remember what it's called, but it has like 4 people up on screen at all time, and they kind of just juxtapose between the 4 people's characters. And for life of me, I can't think of the name of it. But I thought that was an interesting technique to use. But as far as, films of late, like the Grand Marigold Hotel, or the Marigold something hotel, where it was just a bunch of folks of a certain age, quote unquote, and it was delightful, and you don't have to be like the daffy grandmom that like falls down and drinks too much and says the wrong thing at the wrong time.
The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, I believe.
Thank you. So it was kind of like looking at those characters and how endearing they were, but also to take a couple that I don't know, man. I don't know if you see it too much at all, like an older lesbian couple and how they navigate their way through life, So that was part of the inspiration of just looking at characters that you don't see. Technique-wise, it was just like, well, what can I utilize to make it still visually interesting, with talking heads mostly, and then how do we incorporate different things with it? So a lot of it had to do with just focusing on their personalities, and so that would be probably the main influences. And I'm taking brain fart on the Steven Soderbergh film with the technique, but yeah, the Exotic Grand Marigold. What's it called again, Andrea?
The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Constantino, did any particular film or movie influence Laura's Hereafter? Particular film, book, etc.
Sì, grazie. Un'altra domanda importante. Io, diciamo, nel mio percorso di regista ho dei punti di riferimento molto precisi. Per me, ecco, il film che mi ha ispirato di più e che mi ha guidato, e che è il film che forse è il film che io amo di più, ecco, è un film di Roberto Rossellini. Rossellini è un grande maestro del neorealismo e io mi rifaccio molto al neorealismo italiano, e in particolare il film che mi ha ispirato per Laura Sirefter è Europa 51, perché ha al suo centro una donna che è interpretata da Ingrid Bergman, un meraviglioso personaggio femminile che diciamo va alla scoperta di se stessa in un contesto, in un mondo attorno a sé difficile, ostile, una storia di emancipazione.
So the main reference for us is Roberto Rossellini, who is an Italian director, neorealist director, and especially the movie Europe 51, who was known also as The Greatest Love, and who is about the story of a woman who fights for her emancipation in a very hostile environment. So this is our main reference for the movie Laura Hereafter.
I can always get behind that. Sorry?
Sorry?
I said I can always get behind that.
Sorry, didn't understand you.
Oh, I said I can always get behind that, the woman fighting for independence and all that.
Yes. And then there was also another movie.
Sì, e poi un altro importante regista per me è invece francese, Robert Bresson, e un film che mi ha ispirato molto, sempre per Laura Seyrechter, è Mouchette. È un film diverso dove la protagonista è questa ragazzina. Questo è un film molto famoso, molto importante, di grande intensità, e anche in questo caso una figura femminile, diciamo, in lotta con un ambiente circostante, con un ambiente sociale ostile. Ecco.
So the other movie is Mouchette by the French director Bresson, and the same story. So about this time it's not a woman, it's a little girl who is fighting in a very difficult environment, but she's fighting for her emancipation, for her independence. So the theme is very similar from two different points of view, from an Italian director and a French director. So,
I also did Constantino, did you say something about Ingrid Bergman?
Ingrid Bergman, because she's the main character in the movie by Roberto Rossellini. So she's the main actress in the movie by Roberto Rossellini. Yes.
Wanted to make sure she got a proper shout out.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And Susan, did you have any influences on any other films influence yours?
Not really. I'd read an article in the Washington Post about Gareth Morgan, who was the philanthropist who launched the campaign Cats to Go, which sent New Zealand into, like, as divisive as, you know, the United States is now, is New Zealand about cats. I mean, it's kind of their it's truly their abortion issue. And everyone has, like, very strong feelings. So I just thought it was just a really interesting thing that I hadn't heard about. And, you know, I'm also, like, kind of obsessed with this idea of unintended consequences. And we see that throughout, like, you know, someone does something and the consequences are, like, just what it just never crossed anyone's mind, right? So I think that was just sort of my impetus.
Of course, that makes yeah, Lord of the Rings isn't even from New Zealand. It just filmed in New Zealand, so naturally that makes me think of how Bilbo took the one ring and the consequences. Yeah. Thank you. And we are coming down to the end of our hour, so I want to ask my traditional final question. And again, start with Mai and Pedro. What upcoming projects do you want to shout out? And I'm sorry, Chi and Pedro. My bad.
Yeah, so we've been developing a project called The River Knows Our Names, and it's about, it's also a feature drama set on Mekong Delta, and it's about stateless communities living on the Mekong. So, there's something that echoes from our last project, which is, I guess this is our thing, like we love it, using real locations and working with people from the communities or known actors, and keep telling these stories, keep trying to tell the stories of underrepresented communities, or stories that are not seen enough yet in the screens in Vietnam, and I guess in the region or elsewhere, but in Vietnam first. So
yes, when people telling stories about Vietnam, sadly, it's usually about violence.
Yes,
and the whole Vietnam War thing.
Yes,
yeah, it's strictly about, and it's usually doesn't really incorporate Vietnamese people in it too much.
Exactly. And then in the cinema, you know, the commercial movies, the movies that sell tickets are like horror movies or romantic comedies, as as things are all over the world, I suppose. So
Don't forget comic books,
yeah.
comic book movies.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And Pedro?
No, that's the project. Yeah, that would be like a project that she will direct, and well, I'm trying to help a little bit with the production of that one, and yeah, hopefully you will see it sometime in the future.
Fingers crossed. And thank you. Laura?
I'm developing a thriller. It's a pretty micro budget, 3 people that are stuck in a cabin, and they have to face all the lies that they're telling each other. So it's called Lying Games, and it's a psychological thriller. And then I'm also developing 2 pilots, TV pilots for streaming. One with the Agnes and Estelle characters, and then another one, both half-hour single camera comedies. So yeah, doing that, writing, trying to get some other stuff going on, but those are my main projects right now.
Nice. And Constantino, any upcoming projects you'd like to shout out?
Sì, noi abbiamo un progetto di un nuovo lungometraggio a cui stiamo lavorando già da diversi anni, che si intitola La musica e il buio, ed è ambientato negli anni 30 in Italia ed è dedicato a uno dei più grandi compositori italiani del Novecento, che si chiama Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, era fiorentino. Lui fu costretto nel 1938 alla fuga negli Stati Uniti a causa delle leggi razziali. Il film racconta la sua storia, e poi si trasferì a Los Angeles, è vissuto poi sempre a Los Angeles, e lì si è dedicato molto all'insegnamento ed è stato il maestro di alcuni dei più importanti compositori di musiche per film americani come John Williams e Jerry Goldsmith.
So we have been working for several years on a project on an Italian composer. He was Jewish in the 30s of the last century. His name was Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, and he was forced to escape to the United States because of the fascism in Italy before the Second World War. So he escaped to Los Angeles, to United States, and he became a teacher of some important American composers. And so we are trying to tell his story, and in particular the moment when he was forced to escape because of the fascism from Italy to United States in 1938. So this is our main project we are working on.
E quindi un film incentrato sulle leggi razziali, e quindi pensiamo che insomma sia un tema oggi molto molto importante e molto attuale.
So we would like to develop this theme that we consider still very important nowadays about racism and about fascism, and so this is why we have been working very hard on it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Grazie. Fingers also crossed for you.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
I can't see, but I am. And once again, last but not least, Susan, upcoming projects you'd like to share.
So in a couple of months, I start shooting a project on the unintended consequences of the disunification of the Korean Peninsula and the creation of the DMZ, which became an unintended wildlife protection zone. And as tourism, as things like periodically, warm up in the relationship between the North and South, the wildlife protection zone becomes threatened by tourism. So, there's unintended consequences there. And, the whole disunification back in the 1950s was an administrative action between the United States and the Soviet Union. And, so there's like all these things going on that no one predicts. And then all this stuff happens. And still, other actions happen and unpredictable, unthinkable sort of things occur. So that's one of the projects that I'm starting in production in a couple months, and others I've been in production on.
Sounds fascinating. So yeah, hope good luck on that one as well. And yeah, also fingers crossed for you. So yes, I want to thank you all for coming, for submitting to the film festival. And these are all wonderful feature films, and these are just a few of the directors of the features we have. So filmgirlfilm.com, Event Hive, check them out. They're wonderful. And once again, thank you all for showing up and chatting, and your patience when things suddenly went a bit haywire. And have a good day, night, wherever you happen to be right now.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, everybody. Good luck on your
Thank you.
project.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.